So thank you so much for your voice notes. Keep them coming on our number 061 410 4107, 061 410 4107. And if you want to rather join the conversation on the telephone, we are on 086 000 2032, 086 000 2032, or the Twitter feed or X feed on at SAFM Radio, and hashtag please SAFM Talking Point as you talk to us. So we're trying to understand now at 10:15 the structures of local government. It's a series with Miyelani Holeni, who's an expert in local government. And with this series, we're trying to understand the various aspects of local government. It is the engine room of the economy, yet it's such a complex space and appears to be structured in a way that appears to be equally just as complex. Where does it all start? Is it something that was introduced under the democratic regime, or has it always been like this? Miyelani is in the studio. Maybe let's start with the historical background of the governance system. Miyelani, welcome. Good morning. Thank you for making the time to come to the studio. Maybe let's start with the historical background then of the governance system.
Thank you very much, KG, and good morning to the listeners. And I'm hoping that, with this series, it will help, most of our citizens to be able to take their rightful positions in terms of active citizenry. Mm-hmm. So I think the structure of government, let me start by just talking about the structure of our government. Our government in South Africa has three spheres of government, being the national, being the provincial, as well as the local government. The local government is obviously the newest in terms of, having been formed, and it had to go through transitions to get to a point where we have what we call as the local government as it is. But I think importantly is we must also then look at, where does the model of our government come from? Before the democracy, when things were brewing and were looking like, there's a change, a big change that was coming. We've seen that, the now ruling party, ANC, had to send some very clever people to go around the world to go and study various models of what would we implement as a country. Because the big thing was, how do we unify the entire country and take away the Bantustans and take away the previously white areas and take away all of those different areas and unify it essentially into one government. So they found a system that was taken from Canada. Canada has three spheres of government, and in many ways Canada has many similarities, in terms of, the systems, in fact we've borrowed from Canada all of the systems that we have of having a national, a provincial, as well as a local government. So essentially we've taken a system that works in the first world, and we have brought it, into an African context. And I think, you can then imagine the type of
Do we know,
problems.
though, why we specifically chose the Canadian system of all of the systems?
Well, I think, at that stage there was, in my analysis, haste to get to the point where we could agree a constitution, because there would have to be a new constitution. There was haste to agree that, let's go to govern. So it's the whole issue of, are we ready to govern? How can we expedite the pace for us to be able to govern the country should the elections go away? And indeed, elections went the way of the current ruling party, and that is where the system that we have of local government, comes from. And of course, it had to go through the Local Government Act of 1998 to at least, start putting it together so that, you can eventually have what we have. And of course, there are many assumptions that were made within the Local Government Act of 1998, some of which have been implemented, most of which may not have been implemented. So the structure that we currently have, we can safely say it has been taken or abstracted, from the Canadian system of having the three spheres. There are other countries around the world that have different, spheres. Some even have as much as four spheres, such as India and so on. And if you look at the US, it's, the two tiers, as well as going deeper into the four tiers as well, of having the federal government and the states and going into counties and then going into the local municipality. So I think that is what we have chosen. So whatever solutions, whatever problems, whatever design issues, whatever the deficiencies that we sit with, and whatever the successes that we sit with, is we have taken a system and at least made a bold view to take that system. Now it's upon the country to make that system works. And as we know that, the national and the provincial is more policy driven, it's more bigger matters and projects and so on. And then the local government, of course, has its own structure, which I think, we can go deeper into.
So when we're going to go to break, when we come back from break, I want to find out from Miyelani of the local government system that we, got from the Canadian system. I'm sure you heard him say there's parts that we've implemented and there's parts of that system that we haven't implemented. What have we implemented? What haven't we implemented, and why? And whether or not, if it's structured in such a way that if at a certain point we feel that it's not viable for us, we're able to redefine it for it to be more relevant to the lived experiences of South Africans. But we'll continue that conversation in a short while. We're trying to understand the structures of local government, and we'll continue that conversation in a short while. It's
#SAFM Talking Point.
It's 10:23. Welcome back. We're understanding the structures, particularly of local government, and it's a series with Miyelani Holeni, who's an expert in local government. And I think actually the more basic the question, the better, because I see some of your WhatsApps are already coming through. Somebody is even asking why, for example, local government is political and previously it wasn't political. Do you want to start there?
So I think, going into the issue of political versus non-political and so on. So local government had to, by its own design, have representatives, of which the representatives would represent the people or represent, communities, or be conduits within which the councils, as they would have been called then, would be able to reach the communities. And of course, in the way that they were structured, it was, councils where you would have a town clerk, you would have a finance person, you would have, all of the various areas, all the way to the, engineers that would be within the municipality. And of course, their daily jobs were to wake up, go and deliver services, make sure there's electricity, make sure there's water, make sure the roads are paved, and so on and so forth. So the whole issue of representation obviously started coming in when there was major unhappiness within the citizenry, when other citizens look at, the other councils which are thriving, whereas, the ones that they were in are not thriving and things are not moving as much as they should. And you can look at, whether it's the black councils, versus the white councils, as we would call it, then you would see, for instance, Springs, versus Etwatwa, you would see, Soweto versus, the rest of, Johannesburg, and so on and so forth. So that is where I think, part of the politicization started to also come in, because there were other battles that were also being fought at the country level. So I think the issue of, politics, then flowed into that system. And of course, the Canadian system also has the political side as well, which emphasizes the political side. Because in theory, if you have people who can represent people and the voices of people, you avoid a stampede and a multiplicity of voices that, may not be synthesized into something that makes, at least, understandable, or at least, coherent, sense that can then be implemented. So that is where I think that also the political side of things comes from, the system that we have chosen from the Canadian system, because then it allows, for council, it allows, for the other structures, that have now been created because of that system. And then our system goes further because it has 3 levels to it. You have the category A, which is the cities, you have the category B, and then you have the category C, which would sit as the local. So in that way, you have a system that even has 3 levels. So we have 3 spheres, we have 3 levels. So I think to your opening with regards to the complexity, and then you add the political side, and then you add as well the fact that there has to be officials that have to operate within the space. So I think the structure of what we have is what we are perhaps trying to make the best of, to drive, the representation of the people. And then naturally politics come in, because that is where in our, at least electoral system, the issue of independence, it's still coming in, but not at the level that, it should be at perhaps, or it not being taken up at the level that it should be taken up, and so on. So the political parties tend to then mirror across the national, provincial, all the way to the national government with regards to their representation, and also purporting to be representing the people, because they have to go through the campaigning, and they do want.
I love that word, purporting, because purporting implies they say one thing and then sometimes they end up doing another, as we see most of the time in local government, when we know, as well as we do now in hindsight, that the engine room of the functionality or the manifestation of the intentions of a government at the engine room level with local government. When we adopted that Canadian system, is there a point at which we ever even said to ourselves, we'll review it at this point and say these parts of it are functional and these parts of it are not functional? And I'll tell you why I asked that. I asked that because earlier on you said, there's things that we're implementing and there's things that we're not implementing. So I want to know, what are we implementing and why aren't we implementing it? And knowing that, then did we ever, in the founding documents say, okay, if, for example, after 30 years, we feel that certain parts of it are not working, we'll review and redefine for reason X and Y?
So this is where now we go into the Local Government Act of 1998, a well-written document. And I think for me, the purpose of that document was to give birth to what we have now as a local government in South Africa. A couple of assumptions that were made is that each and every municipality will have industry wherever it is, and therefore it will be able to sustain itself. Therefore, it must then be able to raise its own revenue. Okay, the truth is that some municipalities are in the urban areas, some are peri-urban or semi-urban, and some are in the rural areas where you don't find, the type of economy that would be able to sustain the particular municipality. Then talk about issues of local economic development, because then each and every municipality must be running an economy that contributes to the greater economy of the country. And that function, I think, for me, is one of the most glaring ones, which has perhaps not been enacted to the way that it should. Only perhaps the cities and the more thriving secondary cities have made attempts, to be able to drive the economy of the area. So I think the issue in terms of, where and how the assumptions have come, forward, I think it was they meant well with regards to that. And the idea should have been always that, the system should have been implemented and it should have been reviewed. For instance, you take, the areas that were thriving, which had industries. You group them nicely because they were cities and they have infrastructure. They have largely organized, population in terms of, jobs, corporates, and schools and churches and all of the different amenities, and you group it and you make it, for instance, the city of Johannesburg. You group another one is Nelson Mandela Bay. If you look at the patterns of all of those cities, those were cities that would have run as councils, or at least as in some forms, a number of councils within it, which would be self-governing within themselves. Now we've amalgamated them to become what the now category A, and it's a big city. It has a big budget. It has large populations within it, and it's obviously a hub of some sort within there. So the whole idea was a city vis-a-vis a district vis-a-vis a local.
Okay.
Let
me ask you to pause because I have to go to news headlines. I don't want to miss anything important. And invite the listeners to also call in and ask, because we're deconstructing local government for the purposes of our understanding, so that we can use it in our lived experiences more efficiently and more effectively than probably what we do now. And we invited Miyelani Holeni, who's an expert in local government, to be part of this series. It's 10:31 though now. It's time for the news headlines. Luyanda Maome is standing by. Welcome back. It's 10:33. We're understanding the structures of local government in a series with local government expert Miyelani Holeni, and we're trying to understand the various aspects of what makes local government, as it is the engine room of the economy. And of course, we invite you to call in if you have a question for Miyelani. And trust me, no question is too base point for this one. You can call on the number 086 000 2032, 086 000 2032, or on the WhatsApp line 061 410 4107. Mike in Middleburg. Mike is a former mayor. Hi, Mike.
Hi, KG, and your guest. Thank you very much for taking my call. Yes, I think your guest will agree with me and most of the listeners, of course, that the local government, yes, it is the coalface of service delivery, overly regulated, but yet so vulnerable. Most of corruption has happened there or is happening there. It attracts, all kinds of characters, including gangsters, and that is why many institutions have collapsed, some even beyond repair. Now, in your view, Lani, in terms of the lessons we've learned, over a period of time with all these damages, fraud and corruption, what is it that we need to do in terms of amendment, the laws that govern us, so that we can do better? Because truth be told, much as we have inherited this system from Canada, I believe that in terms of representatives, they don't just allow anyone to come in. Unlike here in South Africa, here, a street walker who knows nothing about governance can just be robbed in as long as there is some blind loyalty, you see. So I know we have spoken about this, and Salga has pronounced on it, but the fact of the matter is that when the principals, the political parties, do not value the kind of deployment or the value of a person who must be deployed, really.
Or the caliber, Mike, or the caliber, because
yes,
I love what you said, and I think it's extremely profound when you said it's an overly regulated environment, yet it's extremely vulnerable. And you even go on to say it's vulnerable to an extent where it attracts gangsters. And I think that's extremely profound for somebody particularly who's a former mayor.
I know what I'm talking about. I have seen people planning, KG, when we have systems running very well, yielding desired results. But because they want to access the cookie jar, they will plan thoroughly to come and collapse that system just to get their hands into the cookie jar. Very, very unfortunate, local government. But let me hear what your guest has got to say.
Thank you, Mike. Do you want to respond to Mike, Miyelani?
Yeah, so I think let's respond to it, and thank you for the question, Dr. Mike. So let's be structural. So I'm going to give you a number, which is, the institutions within local government. So 8 cities, 44 district municipalities, 205 municipalities. This is what the country has. Now, there's a new thinking around clustering, of municipalities, so that, you have a district development, type model. One is the fact that, we have so many municipalities. I think for starters is one that, lends itself to having a number of, people that, must come in and be seen to be doing something, must be elected, to go and represent, someone, must be coming into council to go and do whatever the case may be. So in a system like this, where you have such, ubiquitous municipalities or a lot of municipalities, it lends itself, to saying, okay, let's, open, the floodgates, or, this one is more popular than the other. and all of these, contestations. And I do understand that there's order that is being created. We talk of professionalization, perhaps a subject for another day. But the issue here is that we have too many municipalities that, we are having to deal with. And therefore, you are having to have so many people that must come into the representation or become an official and so on. So we are breaking up, I think, a whole that should be sitting as a conglomerate of municipalities. Why not then look at, the 44 and say all of, the municipalities that are 205, around the country, because they fall into a district in some way, we are going to make those a center of, the particular area, the geographical area that is there, and it's going to be managed, from one center, because currently we have too many centers. And I also say as well, if we were to amend, all of this, is as a country, we are a country of too many plans. Each one is running around with a plan. I have a plan for this.
And we struggle very hard with implementation of those plans.
And we struggle very hard with implementation of plans. So plans. And so if plans proliferate, you have now a duty to align, you have a duty to consult, you have a duty to please, and so on and so forth. So I think for us, let's look at rationalizing the structure. Firstly, those 3 levels that we have, make it 2 levels, make it, the cities are already what they are, make the districts, as well as the municipalities, perhaps, one single entity that is going to be driving development within that area. And what you do get as well is at least some of the assumptions around industry can be realized, because some of the towns within a district do have an industry of some sort. So if you're looking at least creating a single budget which is large enough, which can then be used to subsidize other areas, you almost have it. We have grants, flowing into rural municipalities who have no capability, who have no capacity, and are challenged, with regards, to leadership, are challenged, with regards to not being able to implement, the strategy. So if you jump, in terms of, how to rationalize, local government, but it is important that, at least, that system we understand very well, because the cities at least are closer, to the people. The locals are closer to the people. What are the districts, there for?
Yeah.
Okay? The districts, don't, in some cases, provide services, save for those who are water service authorities.
Yeah.
Save those who are perhaps, running airports, within the area, or other health, functions, or any other functions that, or roads, for that matter. But, so in a way, you have some kind of a duplication with, these 8 cities, 44 districts, 205 locals and so on. So that would be at least, a way of looking at how do we start, to restructure ourselves and create, a single, local government. But we still have to go towards making sure that there's uniformity across government itself.
Yes.
Because locals are treated, as, they have their own pension fund, they have their own public service, if you want, if I may put it in those terms. They are regulated, obviously, differently. You have a PFMA, you have an MFMA, and all of those, areas. So I think there's also legislation that we need to go into to look at, how is that legislation serving local government and actually serving government as a whole, because local government is part of government, provincial government is part of government, as well as national government. So there is actually one government that we need to be looking at and how it can operate seamlessly and reduce the number of plans, reduce the number of structures or organs and so
staff.
on. And staff as well on that note. Yeah.
Okay, we have more calls. Anonymous in the Western Cape. Hi, Anonymous.
Hi, hello, good morning, and good morning to your guest as well. I just have 2 or 3 questions, and I would listen through the radio. I want to know why are IDPs not meeting the targets, or in certain local municipalities not implemented, and how does the municipality measure that? And if it could be that maybe legislation can be changed, maybe to move it to a different sphere, to ensure that the implementation of IDP plans are being implemented by local municipalities. The second one is that I'm quite worried within the local municipality between political interference and service delivery at the end of the day, because it seems to me that within local municipality, it's more about fighting one another than to ensure that the plans are being implemented and that we have a functionally run municipality at the end of the day. Also, that because I'm traveling a lot as well, not only in South Africa, but within my own province as well, I still see the discrepancy in terms of service delivery at a local level between the haves and the have-nots. And to me, that really poses a threat to anything, because it can pose a threat to health risk, it can pose a threat to any kind of disaster, to unemployment, etc. Because if you don't have a fully functional local government that actually are there for the people, unfortunately, some of the things are going to fall through the cracks, and we would sit with municipalities on a local level that are being just going backwards at the end of the day. And if you travel, specifically the Western Cape as well, things are not so glittery as it sounds, and if people want to make it out there, just go and travel and visit some local municipalities here within the Western Cape, which are run by and I don't want to become sounds like a politician or whatsoever, but it is run by this province. But it is still an issue of service deliveries are happening within those rich areas, from Plettenberg Bay to Bishop's Court to Stellenbosch, in Paarl, where
I think we
actually live.
I think we get the crux of the point. Thank you, Anonymous. Do you want to listen then to the response on the radio? Okay. Do you want to respond, Miyelani?
Yeah. So the issue of measurement, of course, is a crucial one. But the issue of measurement must at least be centered around the fact that is there a credible plan which has been put in place. Now, we've now looked at, the cities, the districts, the locals. Now let's look at, the legislation that would drive, whatever, the space, for instance. We know that there's a, Systems Act, the MFMA, and a host of, other, legislation that we can also talk about. But the main issue here is that the IDP becomes now the strategy. When we talk, and we've spoken before about capability, and capability is simply defined as leadership, strategy, and service delivery. So the issue of leadership, I think we've touched on, and we are touching on it because of, the issues of conflict that, is being raised. So if you don't have a leadership that, at least is able to drive the municipality to where it should be going and create stability, create, governance, and be able to then craft a strategy, which is, essentially the IDP. The IDP should carry in itself and must carry in itself the programs which are going to be implemented by that municipality. They must be measurable. Now, some of those programs may not be measurable. Some of those programs may not be fully funded. Some of those projects may require other stakeholders. Some of those programs may be ambitious, for whatever, reason. So I think this is where the issue of crafting IDPs that are smart, which are simple, measurable, actionable, have a time, bound by time to them, and you can then be able to measure those IDPs. Some of them are written as huge documents, which no one really bothers to go back to that IDP to look at it. So let's simplify that IDP so that you start to create measurement, you start to create transparency, you start to create accountability, because this is where the information for the citizenry is unfortunately buried, because if the citizenry is within that local or within the district or within the city does not read what is in the IDP, it means that they've actually missed, a complete implementation plan or the ability to call for accountability within there. So I think the issue that is being we should be looking at is perhaps looking at simplifying those IDPs and making sure that they are more transparent and making sure that they are more concrete or tangible. with regards to time-bound issues. And they must be at least centered within that locality or within that particular area. But in this case, if you look at the district, has sometimes 3 to 5 municipalities. Each one may have its own IDP. How do those IDP then come together? And this is perhaps the role of the district to bring those plans together. And I think the DDM, lofty as it is, it tries to also then wants to bring the budgets, and not only from a local government point of view, but from a provincial as well as a national point of view. Conflict is inevitable. I think, if you're running institutions and structures, conflict is inevitable. But the issue here is that, is there an accountability system that comes from the citizenry that holds the elected, members
officials
and the officials to account? There's council every month that is open to everyone. Who of us invest the time to go and sit in council and listen to the resolutions and the items that are being passed, within there, and be able to then come back, to our wards and then report back, or at least raise issues that are pertinent. So I think having gone into those, structures, for instance, if you take the local or the or the cities, they now have wards where there should be ward committees that are driving the elementary parts of how all of this comes together. And if those structures are not functioning, you then have a problem of the council steamrolling or going on as if, they have the support, or at least going on as if, the matters that are discussed, everyone is in full agreement, or there's consensus across the board. So I think that is where, if you look at, the issue of measurement, conflict, but the issue of lived experience, I think is one which we are grappling with quite a lot, because the lived experience still emanates from that capability issue of, do we have the leaders that, have the best interest of the citizenry at heart? Do we have the simplified, or at least the tangible, measurable strategies that are going to be implemented as soon as the elections are done? Do we then have that capacity to drive the service delivery? Do we have the right skills? Do we have we don't have vacancies or in crucial positions where they are acting? Do we have, people who are taking their jobs, seriously? Do we have qualified people? And all of those issues start, coming into bear, because then that is now the system.
Yeah.
If we take it from there, of how
that is now a working system.
That is now a working system.
Yeah.
And theoretically, that working system should work because of all of these things that bound it together. But we can then look at, why is it not working? Yeah.
What do we need to do to change it? We'll come back with you, Sean, in Jeffreys Bay, and you, Zig, in Randburg, and Tulane. I don't know whether you're Xolani in Tulane or Tulane in Xolani, but we'll come back with all three of you as we understand the structures of local government with local government expert Miyelani Holeni, who's my guest in the studio. It's 10:51.
SAFM.
So many questions to get through as we try for today's session to understand the structures of local government. Remember, this is a series, and Miyelani will be back. Is it next week or next month? We'll be back next month. We'll be back. Sorry, Lebo had to clarify. We'll be back next month to try and understand the various aspects of what makes the engine of government, which is local government, be what it is, and how we as citizens need to interact with it to make it more efficient. Zig in Randburg, good morning.
Good morning, KG. Your guest was very impressed with the Canadian system. I bet you Canada doesn't look anything like.
It's not like him who's impressed. He's saying it's what we chose as a government.
Yeah, I think any system would be better than, would be in the same situation, I should say, as a result of the deployees who enriched themselves from the bottom to the top, but it really started from the top and downwards, and there is no longer service delivery in because 3/4 of all local councils, they call them, and municipalities are totally dysfunctional. they have been eradicated, but I'm sure those councillors are still well paid. Would you believe it? And so it goes on without service deliveries. And I'm amazed that anything still works in Joburg, because a lot of things still happen to work. And I don't know how it can possibly be. But what I wanted to point out is it is a super enrichment exercise where, number one, all the people who did any work in any municipality at all had to be replaced because they happened to be white. And then guess who replaced them? The guys who couldn't do the job at all. And then
what are you implying though, Zig? That didn't go past me. You say they replaced white people, and they replaced them with who couldn't do the job. What are you saying?
Well,
that didn't go past me.
Comrades. Well, is there any engineers still?
Are you implying they're all white? I mean, they're all black. Is that what you're implying?
No, they're deployees. It's deployees. You could employ wonderful black engineers. And in fact, Lindiwe Sisulu imported engineers from Cuba.
Okay, you must get to your point quickly, Zig, because I want to get to other people.
The point is that people who could do the jobs were retrenched, number one. And the rest of the guys who supervise them, who are the councillors, that a lot of them are killing each other for the jobs because they're overpaid to do nothing. They said, one guy said on the radio this morning on your radio station that in eThekwini they didn't do anything at all. And yes, I do believe there are some councillors who do work, and we respect them like we used to. But in the past, it used to be respectable people who went into there without even being paid at all.
Okay, Zig. Tulane in the Eastern Cape. Hi, Tulane.
Hi, KG. Oh, in actual fact, Kolani, even the Chinese can say Sholani sometimes. Anyway, Kate, let me just get to the point.
Please.
The Municipal Finance Management Act, the Public Finance Management Act, seem to be ignored until the citizens get exposed. This thing can be done maybe at a basic level where kids are taught the basics of the PFMA and MFMA. Why? Because it's going to help them when every official comes, when they start talking. If they are not talking on those acts, then the citizens will understand. Because as it stands, you've got regional branches from a political space where you've got either the district or the local government which are not talking to each other, but then there's these regional offices or branch offices of the political party that is in charge at that particular point in time, that is now commanding the people inside the municipalities to do things their way. So the decentralized decisions by the political party also plays a huge negative impact on how the municipalities should operate.
Thank you, Tulane. I just want to read one or two WhatsApps for you, Miyelani, so that you respond collectively to everybody and maybe give us an idea as what happens next, the next time you come next month. There's another one who says, hi, KG, can your guest give us how the reporting and escalation structure for service delivery issues work? MG in Monti, and I thought that's important. Another one, there are standard service delivery policies that are all municipality or districts that must be adhered to with performance bonuses to get rich and poor area service delivery the same. I don't know, Quintus in Gqeberha, but I don't know. You can give me your final thoughts because time flew completely away, and then maybe give us an idea as to what else you want to add in the discussion when you come back next month.
Yeah, so I think based on what at least the questions have come up from, obviously we're looking at how the structure looks like, and it's important that we talk about this reporting as well as escalation, because municipalities are a business within government because they have to collect money.
Yes.
They have to render services.
Yes.
And they have to buy stock in the form of electricity and water and, receptacles.
For distribution?
For distribution. So if things then go wrong, it means that, they must have a strong customer relationship management system. as well as people, as well as processes that, must be in place. And I think this is how now the escalation happens. So currently we still have, for instance, the ward councillor that, you can go to the ward councillor. But what should the ideal be is that you must be able to either pick up a telephone, send a text, write an email, or present yourself at the municipality so that, your query should be captured. And that query should not just end at the CRM department. It should be able to travel to the technical, if it's a technical issue, to the finance, if it's a technical finance issue, and all the way up to having an escalation system which goes all the way to the municipal manager, because that is the accounting officer. So essentially we're saying that, each and every municipality must have a CRM department. And that is how the escalation should happen. Yes, escalation should also happen through the ward councillor, because they should be able to go and hold the officials now to account with regards to that issue. But that it should be an exception, because systems within a municipality should be able to work to the extent to which you can solve, the most basic
and pressing issues
and the most complex of issues within there. So currently, I think that is what it is, that, you should be able to walk in, you should be able to email, you should be able to send in a message, and I think make sure that, that query is captured and you come back with a reference number, or you have a reference number that you can always go back to. If you don't get a reference number, how do you know that, that query has been captured and it's being attended to within the municipality? So that is where the offices must work.
All as we hear people phoning radio stations all the time saying, no, nobody gave me a reference number, nobody answered me, nobody said anything, nobody knows. So I'm sure we'll continue again as we expand next month. But thank you for your time, for coming through today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Miyelani Holeni, expert in local government. It's 11:01. Mudupi Makhalemele is standing by with the news.